Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Wisteria here. Thanks for tuning in to listen, regardless if you're on the podcast or if you're on YouTube. I appreciate it very much. This is the last folk tale from the Shropshire folk tales anyway. And it's called The Devil and the Stiper Stones. The Stiper stones rears out of the landscape like the spine of a dragon, and glowers over the surrounding landscape. Large rock outcrops jut up from its back, silhouetted against the sky. There are no trees on the hill, except for a grove of ancient hollies clinging to the northeast slope. The hill is rocky, uneven, underfoot, covered in shale and scree. Bracken, heather, and whinberries hug the scant soil, providing cover for red grouse. Above, the buzzards soar upwards, and the lapwings give their forlorn pewit, pewit, pewit. On summer days, with clear skies, the Stiper Stones is a beautiful place. Families come with picnics to go whinberry picking. But even in summer, the weather can change in a heartbeat. A clear sky can suddenly turn brooding and overcast. A cold wind and a shiver calling a retreat to home. In winter, the Stiper Stones can be a bitter, bleak place, with ice-clad shreds of stone piercing through a shroud of snow. There are many stories associated with the Stiper Stones. All agree that the Stiper Stones is a portentous place, a place to be wary of. Pretentious, I think it means, and it's spelt wrong, guys. If anyone dares to sit on the devil's chair, they will instantly trigger a thunderstorm. If someone is brave or foolish enough to spend the night at the foot of the devil's chair, they will be dead, or a poet when morning comes. There are several tales of people trying it, light-hearted versions. They always run home long before the night is over. But there are sadder tales. There are stories of hikers found dead from hypothermia. The Stiper Stones is where all the bad things meet. Witches, boggarts, ghosts, boogles, remnants, all presided over by the devil himself. Once a year, on the longest night, they gather to swap stories of their achievements over the past 12 months and plan their revels for the coming year. 7 birds, brothers born at the beginning of time, roam the Stiper Stones, but one brother is separated and lost, doomed to be alone until the end of time. The birds are the 7 whistlers, named for their whistling cry. 6 birds search the Stiper Stones, calling for their brother. But the day they find him, the world will end. It is bad luck to hear the whistle's cries. A few years ago, I accompanied a journalist to Stiper Stones, and Halloween was looming. A famous horror novelist had written a book, actually, the latest book in Shropshire, and the journalist had come to write about the dark side of Shropshire in it itself, rather than send somebody else, which is different. The Stiper Stones was naturally on their agenda. I wasn't convinced it was such a good idea to go up to the Stiper Stones in the dark, but we weren't going there on Halloween night itself, and the promise of, well, a few things, actually, made me, decide to go. Stiperstone's inn was enough to dispel my forebodings, let's say. Leaving late, it was nearly 10 o'clock when we arrived at the base of the Stiperstones. It was a clear night. Looking up from the car park, we could see the shadowy stones, black against the deep blue velvet sky. So, we began to climb the hill, our feet slipping on the scree. We were less than halfway up the slope when the mist came down. It dropped like a curtain, 10 feet or so from where we stood. The stones vanished behind the cloud. I refused to climb any further and began to tell stories of the hill where we stood. I explained the old myth of the 7 whistlers. A low, soft whistle came from the windberry scrub. The journalists, they all laughed, thinking it was a setup or something, but it wasn't. With slightly shaky knees, I told them the story of the devil and the Stiperstones to explain why I would not take them through that mist. Long, long ago, when the world was new, a prophecy was made. Whispered on the breeze, it passed from father to daughter, mother to son, friend to friend. It passed from mouth to ear until it reached the ear of the old gentleman, Uncle Joseph, the devil himself. The prophecy told that if ever the Stiperstones should sink into the earth, Shropshire and England would be ruined. The devil smiled. There are a lot of souls in England. A quick as thought, he made his way to the top of the Stiperstones. Triumphantly looked out across the county, lifted one hoof and pounded it down. Nothing happened. No grinding stone, no sinking earth. The hill did not even shudder. He jumped into the air and came crashing down with both hooves. Nothing. He took a deep breath, crouched down, leaped as high into the air as he possibly could, and thundered onto the ground. Still the ground withstood him. He pounded up and down until dust gathered around him, and still nothing happened. The devil mopped his brow and collapsed into a rocky outcrop at the top of the hill to catch his breath. The heat from the body seared the rock into the shape of a chair around his body, and it has remained the devil's chair ever since. The devil couldn't understand it. With its strength and power, the stone should slip into the earth like a knife into butter. But the stone stood firm. However, one thing the evil one has learned since he was cast out in patience, the 7 years he offers to bribe a tempted soul pass for him like a breath on the wind, with a prize such as the destruction of England at stake. He was prepared to wait, to plan and to work. Over the years, in spare moments, he came back to the Stiperstones to sit in the chair he had made and try to push it down with the weight of his malevolence. It didn't budge at all, but stayed where it was. One day the devil was down in hell, and a terrible stench crept into his nostrils, a foul odour that made his demons choke and retch. Somehow, fresh air was leaking into hell. He survived the roof of hell, and there he saw it, after creeping and crawling round, surveying every area. A crack. A thin hairline crack. But it was still a crack. When he saw where it was, he smiled. For it was along hell's gutter, the long valley that lies between the Stiperstones and the Long Mynd. At last, the hill was beginning to loosen, he thought. Still, something would have to be done about the smell. He made his way to the Stiper stones to inspect the crack, looking around to see if there was anything handy to plug the leak. There was nothing but heather and windberries, and nothing that would stand up to the sulphurous fumes that reeked from Howl. Then he had an idea. The giants of Scotland and Ireland had formed a truce. They had stopped warring and were building a bridge of friendship, a causeway between the two lands. Peace was the last thing the devil wanted. He would take the stones from the half-built causeway and use those, stirring up mistrust and plugging the gap at the same time. He flew up in the air towards the Irish Sea. He gathered an armful of rock and brought it back to the Stiper stones. He let fall his load, and the rocks lay scattered on the ground, lonely pebbles in a sea of green grass. It was going to be a long day. He traipsed backwards and forwards, carrying load after load. At last, on one trip, he noticed an orchard being harvested. There were men up in the trees, throwing down apples, while the women stood below, catching the apples in their aprons. That's it, thought the devil. I need an apron. He swooped down into the next field of cattle, took 4 of the plumpest, skinned them, and cobbled the skins together into an apron. It was a brilliant idea, and he was able to carry 10 times as many stones on that journey. But by the time he reached the Stiper stones, he regretted his ingenuity. Beads of sweat stood out on his forehead, his arms ached, and his skin was scorching hot. But instead of dumping his load as soon as he got to the valley, he struggled to the top of the hill and collapsed into his chair, hoping the extra weight of the rocks would help push the hills downwards. Slowly he recovered and looked around. The hill still stood as it always had stood before. He tipped his weight forward and then forced it back and down onto the chair. Nothing happened. He lifted himself a bit further and thumped back down, but still, the hill did not move. Finally his patience snapped, and he jumped high into the air, coming hurtling back down onto the rock. It wasn't just his patience that snapped, so did his apron strings. The stones inside the apron smashed and scattered in all directions, littering the top of the hill. The devil let out a howl of fury, threw down the tattered remnants of the apron, and stormed away in a rage. But the devil couldn't keep away for long. The failure nags at him. Whenever he's passing through Shropshire, he returns to sit on his chair, still trying to force the rock downwards. And as he sits there, he sees the scattered scree on the ground, and the smell of sulphur drifts upwards from the unfilled leak. The memory of his failure returns to taunt him and obscure his thoughts. The clouds in his mind call the clouds in the mist of the sky to gather around him. To this day, whenever the Stiper stones is hidden in mist, everyone knows it's the devil. The devil sat in his chair, and the summit is to be avoided. What the devil doesn't understand is that he isn't just fighting the hill and rocks. The people of Shropshire are steadfast, sturdy, and strong. The land relies as much on them as they rely on the land. As long as there is one person in Shropshire with a love of the land, the hills and the rivers, the moors and the meres, the stories and the stones. One person with no room for the devil in their heart, then Stiper stones, Shropshire and England are safe. No matter how long the devil sits brooding on his chair. So the story came to a close, and we looked once more at the thick wall of mist. Thankfully, we began to descend. The moment we started downhill, the cloud lifted, and the devil's chair was once again silhouetted against the sky. The end. Well, I do hope you enjoyed that tale. It's the last one in that section, but there are plenty more. So we're all good. Thank you for listening. I truly appreciate it. If it's not too much trouble, can you please hit that like button and share if you can. If you've not subscribed, then please consider doing so because it does really help, and I am extremely grateful for everyone and anyone who listens. Many blessings.